Hey, what's going on, guys? We've been running a lot of trips lately, and it made me start thinking. We actually ran one today, and this has nothing to do with that trip, so you know who you are. So when you see it, I'm not talking about you. But I've been really watching a lot lately to see, you know, I'm always curious to see why, excuse me for that. I'm always curious to see why people aren't catching fish, why people can't land fish. And one of the things that I've been noticing a lot lately, and I want to talk about, is the functions of the drag on a reel and how to fight a fish knowing the structure that you're in. So, okay, so everybody knows the reel has a drag. And depending on where I'm fishing, that's going to depend on, and what type of fish I'm fishing for, that's going to depend on how I adjust my drag. I usually try to adjust my drag for my clients. You know, when I hand them the rod, if you've ever been with me, you'll hear the drag slip one time, and that's just because I'm pulling it, checking the drag. So when I hand you a rod and we're fishing a wide open area, say we're fishing for reds or snook or something like that, and we're on a flat, I see a lot of people that once they hook the fish, they start cranking the drag down because the drag's slipping. The drag is supposed to slip. The drag is doing its job. If the drag is slipping, the drag is doing its job. You want, you know, if you're fishing like redfish or snook on an open flat, you want that drag to slip and that fish to be able to make his runs. When he surges, if that drag doesn't slip, he's gonna just break you off. So I've had a lot of clients lately breaking off because I see them hook the fish and start cranking the drag down. And I'm telling them, no, leave the drag where it is. We want him to run. You want that fish to run. Now, with that being said, we're talking about an open flat, and we're talking about snook and reds. Now, an exception to that is, say, if I'm fishing deep water and I'm fishing for inshore grouper. Now, that fish is a beast. One of the hardest fighting fish, pound for pound, in Tampa Bay, as far as anything I've hooked. That fish, a 10-pound grouper will work you over. So that's why I have my grouper rod out today. Now, the deal with the grouper is those grouper live on the bottom in the rocks, and it always amazes me because they'll pick up a bait and run 20 feet to the right and stop. They know where their home is. They will get you in the rocks, they will flare up, and they will stick themselves in that hole. So with the grouper, what I want to do in that situation is I may tighten the drag down a little more. I may lock the drag down because I want to stop him. I would rather him break me off full pull than I would him go in the rocks and just lay there on me. You know, and sometimes they'll come out of the rocks, but we'll talk about that later on. So let your drag do its job. In the same situation, if I'm fishing deeper water and say I'm tarpon fishing, okay, now I know that I'm focusing on tarpon. Tarpon are gonna run, tarpon are gonna jump. I want him to be able to take line. Don't lock down on a tarpon. If your drag is slipping, your drag is doing its job. You just want to lightly adjust the drag, a little heavier, a little lighter for different situations and scenarios. Okay, so that's what I got to say about the drag. All right, now we're going to talk about fighting a fish. Okay, circle hooks. All I use on my boat is circle hooks. I know 90% of the captains out there just use circle hooks. Okay, so I'm going to tie it around the back of my truck here, so we can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Actually, let me just hook it on there. All right, so this is a good example. So I'm fishing. I get a bite. My circle hook does its job. It hooks the fish. Okay? The rod's bending, the drag's screaming. I've got that fish locked up. He's on there. When you're fighting this fish, don't feel like you have to reel down and set the hook and reel down and set the hook and reel down and set the hook. Once that rod bends on a circle hook and you've got good hard pressure on that fish, you've got that fish hooked. So unless you're fishing for, you know, with a J hook and you're fishing for sharks or maybe something like that with a tough mouth that you really got to drive that hook into, if you're using circle hooks and you're fishing for grouper, snapper, tarpon, snook, reds, trout, pompano, I don't care what you're fishing for. If you're using a circle hook, let that circle hook do its job. Stop trying to drive the hook into the fish, because what happens is when I try to drive that hook into that fish, Every time I drop that rod tip and I set the hook again, what I'm doing is I'm wearing a hole in that fish. All right, so if I've got him in the corner of the mouth, circle hook did its job, and I keep snatching every time I reel down and I set the hook again and I set the hook again and I set the hook again, that hole's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So now, any little bit of slack, the hook's gonna drop right out of the fish. It's gonna fall right out of his mouth. And that's what I'm running into sometimes right now, grouper fishing, is yes, I mean, it's a hard fighting fish. We've been on them lately, the bite's been good, it's exciting, the drags are locked down, and it's you against him. But once that rod is bent, fight the fish. Stop setting the hook on him because you're wearing a hole in his mouth. All right? Now, another scenario where with fighting a fish that is causing people to lose some fish that I'm seeing. And like I said, guys, this is nothing towards anybody. This is because I want you guys, you know, getting the fish to bite a lot of times is half the battle. The other half is getting the fish to the boat. Know what you're dealing with, know what kind of fish you're dealing with, know what kind of danger you have around if you hook a fish that he could break you off on. Okay, so now fighting the fish. And this is almost like the hook set. So once that fish is on and you reel down and you hold on. Sorry, let me put this hook away before I hook somebody. You want to pump these grouper. Especially the grouper, the tarpon, the bigger fish, you really want to pump them. But when you pull and you pump that rod up and you drop the rod back down to pump him again, that creates slack. Slack is going to kill you every time when you're fighting a fish. So don't ever lose the bend in that rod. Once I get that rod up and I go to drop back down, I'm reeling on my way back down. I still keep bend in the rod. I'm never letting that rod go straight. If that rod goes straight, that means slack. Good chance you're going to lose the fish. So these are just some things that I've been thinking about lately when I've been on my trips, and I've been noticing. Like I said, we want you guys to catch more fish. I want my clients to catch fish when they hook them. Learn to be, I guess you could say, a better fish fighter, because hooking the fish is only part of the battle. You got to know what kind of fish you're dealing with. You got to know where the trouble's at. You got to know how to use your drag, and you have to know how to fight a fish. So we're going to start putting out some small clips like this, some small shows, short shows like this. I don't know, what do you call them, Jake? Short shows? Some short shows like this to try to help you guys kind of improve your technique, I guess is the best way to say it. And you know, and there's different ways to fight every fish. So learn to use the functions on your rod, learn to use your drag. I can't stress enough, know what kind of fish you're fighting, because if I'm fighting a 30-inch grouper, I'm not going to fight him the same way that I'm fighting a 30-inch snook. They're two completely different fish, fight two completely different ways, and you got to know the difference. And if you learn how to use your equipment the way it was designed to be used, guarantee you when that fish hits, you're going to land more fish. So until next time, check out all our information at the end of the video. If you have any questions, call me, and I appreciate all you guys watching.